So we're looking at ICT application, and in this part of ICT application, we'll be looking at the school management system. Now, when we talk about the school management system, right, we're talking about how we're able to just use ICT to manage a number of different tasks. Use computer, literally, that's what we're saying, in the day-to-day running of a school. And this includes the following, right? Registration and attendance record of student, right? Um, Student performances, computer aided learning. So these are the things that we'll be talking about in the school management system. Now, when we talk about attendance, back in the days, there's that traditional way of taking attendance of students. And that simply means you write on paper, you use paper to be taking attendance, you call a student name and they'll say present. That's old ways. It's just an old system. Even our school, we don't use those methods anymore because that's an old system, but now it's a traditional way and it's time consuming using writing on paper, taking attendance. That's an old system, right? So there are numbers of ways of automating the registration process. Okay, numbers of ways we can automate them. So how can we automate registration and attendance instead of using traditional paper-based method? So you have the use of ID cards. Okay, now those ID cards, they contain right here. You see the ID card right here, right? They contain what we call the magnetic stripe. Okay, they contain what? That magnetic what? Stripe. Okay, so what happens is this magnetic stripe contains the unique ID of the student and the other data of the student, which is what we're going to see when we talk about chapter 8 under safety and security. We'll talk about personal details. Okay, I'm just giving you guys a heads up, and that's something you see when we move along in this course. So what happens that every early morning, okay, early morning you come to school, and then what happens? Using the magnetic stripe reader, you can swipe in your card, and then you can now put in your PIN, okay, and that would automatically register you present for the day. Okay, so this will give you a comprehensive record when the student attended the school and numbers of hours they attended, because at the end of the day, before leaving the school, you also have to swipe in, right, and then type in your PIN to sign out. So that is another way to give a student, using the paper base, the student can just register and go home. But with an ID card, the student can be known at all times. Okay, this is very, very important. Okay, there are further functions that we can use. We talk about the PIN and of course GPS. Now, most ID cards can contain a GPS tracking chip where we can track your whereabouts to know if you're actually in school or probably you're not in school and you're saying you're in school. So this is one way to look at it. Okay, let's talk about the second method. And the second method right there on the screen is the use of biometrics. Biometrics. And we'll see something about that in chapter 8 as well, because we'll talk about biometrics as well. When we talk about biometrics, right, this simply means certain data that are unique to the student. Okay, unique to the student. And for the learners, it simply means that each of the learners would need to have their fingerprint recorded. Okay, their personal details plus their fingerprint would need to be stored in a centralized database. Okay, so that's very important. Now let's talk about the advantage. Okay, let's talk about the advantages, okay, of using method 1. Okay, using method 2. Okay, method 2. I want to split my screen. Split. Okay, using method 2 compared to method 1. So let's look at the first one. The first one is fingerprints, right? Fingerprints are unique. right? So it would be possible. So it would be impossible. Impossible for a student to sign in pretending to be somebody else. Pretending to be someone else. Okay? Pretending to be someone else. It will be impossible. That is why fingerprints are so unique. So you cannot just say, I am Iyanoluwa, and when you put your fingerprint, you Ben Sochi. That's not possible now. So how come you Iyanoluwa? So that is very important. So that's why fingerprint are unique. Another advantage we can look at is the fact that ID cards, because the method two is ID cards, right, which contains magnetic stripe, and this is for biometrics. So ID cards could be easily lost. Okay, but fingerprint, right? Fingerprints are part of you. They can't tell you, okay, Mr. Jao, I lost my fingerprint. I don't think that's possible. How can you lose your fingerprint, right? Okay, so because fingerprints are part of you, right? They are part of you, so it cannot be lost. Okay, it cannot what? Be lost. Okay, let's talk about another one. Now, ID cards are affected by magnetic fields. ID cards are affected. Okay, I think my writing, my reading and writing is not the same thing. ID cards are affected by what? Magnetic fields. Okay, which would stop them working properly. But fingerprints, they are not affected by anything, which is a good advantage. Okay. Another one we'll talk about is ID cards are easier to clone. Okay. But with fingerprints, ID card is easier to clone. Fingerprints are difficult. Okay. Difficult to forge. Or let's not say difficult, not um, you know, difficult, right? Yes, people they have a way around it, but it's very difficult. Let's put the word. Fingerprints are very difficult to forge. Okay, so this is an advantage compared to that. Let's talk about disadvantage. Disadvantage. Disadvantage of using method 2 compared to method 1. So if you ask in IGCSE, you could just say that fingerprints are not affected by magnetic fields, right? Unlike your ID cards, and ID cards are difficult to forge. And of course, fingerprints, they are part of you. They cannot be easily lost. So I'm just using that to just compare to give you an idea. For disadvantages here, you can see that it would take a long time to collect the fingerprint for what student, for every student, okay, in the school. Now, another one is the equipment that is needed. You need to have equipment to do biometrics. So the equipment needed to read the fingerprint is expensive. Okay, the equipment needed to read the fingerprint is expensive, so you need to take note. The equipment needed to read the fingerprint is what? Expensive. Okay, expensive. Now, what happens if a student mistakenly cuts his or her fingerprint, right? It might not be identified in the system because guess what? That fingerprint has an issue. So it might not be able to read those informations on time, right? Or there might be a little bit of difficulty reading that information. There might be a bit difficulty reading that what? Information. That difficulty reading that info. Okay, so the equipment needed to read the fingerprint is expensive. All right. The next thing we want to talk about is I talked about the fact that your fingerprint, right? If there's a cut in your fingerprint, what happens? The system might not be able to what? Detect it, right? May not be able to identify it. Okay. Now, another one is the invasion of privacy. Invasion of privacy. Whether I like it or not, many parents or students may object to having their fingerprint stored in the database. Because what happens if those fingerprints in database have been exposed or sold? Yes, every school have what we call Data Protection Act. We see this in chapter 8. I'm sorry that that is my kind of teaching. I like connecting the dots with different chapters. So it all makes sense when we get to those chapters and we'll be able to say, okay, this is linking with this, this is linking with this is linking with this. Okay, because in every organization are being governed with the Data Protection Act. And we'll talk about those things when we get there. So, but then again, we have to look at it with the fact that there are what? Invasions of what? Privacy. There are what? Invasions. This fingerprint, storing of this fingerprint database are what? Invasion of what? Privacy. So we have to look at it. Privacy what? Issues. Okay? Yes. And of course, numbers of students and parents may object on them. Talking about student performances. So we use the use of spreadsheets to be able to monitor the performance of the students. So I have now for my form room, designing if I more advanced spreadsheet where I can be able to monitor all the performances of my form room, because the whole idea is that I want to see where they are making progress, where they're not making progress, how can I come in as much as possible. And it's something probably I might have to just share to them on a private scale for each of them to know their performance. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to do. So at the end of the day, what we have the realistic goal and the targeted goal. At the end of the day, we'll not have the actual goal, right? So we have the realistic. We'll talk about all those things. Just an idea. Just we'll talk about that. I just don't want to bore you all with all the details. Okay, so we use spreadsheet to just monitor the performance of the students. Okay, to know their performances, their academic performances at the end of the day. Computer aided learning. This simply means that this will help to enhance the learning process of the student. It means that students can learn at their own pace. Okay, they can be able to learn at their own pace. And we can also include the use of virtual realities into our learning. And virtual reality is what you see in your extended reality, where it takes you to a fully the world into a world of fantasy, a digital world, where you can be able to see most of these things in a digital format, and you can be able to carry out a lot of things as much as possible. For example, you can be to Mount Everest in a virtual reality, and this makes the learning process to be fun. Okay, now with the use of the computer aided learning, students can stop at any point and can always return later to continue when they left off. I have most of my foreign students to be homeschooled. Most of them they go the early IGCSE, they just concluded early IGCSE. I had some that wrote the February March homeschool. They don't go to school. They write in British Council, right? And that simply means that we have to, they have to use what we call the computer aided learning, so that they can be able to go at their own pace, stop at any time they want to at any point, and they can always continue where they left off. So there are so many things that we can use. Quizzes for them, videos, and I have a lot of video resources, the use of Kahoot, summaries of textbook. I told you guys I've summarized the whole textbook, right? Most of my homeschool students, they have the summary of the textbook. We also have course book, right? Course book. There's also a course book I'm working on. So that makes where in such a way that for every topic, there are series of questions. For every topic, there are series of questions and their answers on how they can be able to answer them. I mean, what I'm working on is like a cheat code, literally. Any student that has a hands on this, that's good mind. Like literally, you just say to yourself, ICT is A star. There's nothing, nothing more than that. Okay, so this simply means that they have all these resources and they can be able to work with themselves. Because at the end of the day, I'm the kind of teacher, I'm going to tell you, I don't like stress. I like taking my thing bit by bit, just working them. And I like working ahead of time. That's why before the term began, you had all your materials. Because I don't like rushing and rushing. It's stressful when you rush students. So you take that time to be able to just digest and they can be able to do other things. So it makes the learning process to be more interactive. Most students don't get to understand the whole process while they're in class. But after this class, they get to play this video over and over and over again. And there's more light and at the end of the tunnel. I don't know why it's not at the beginning or why it's in the end, but that's a story for another time. Okay. They also make use of multimedia, like I talked about videos, um, as much as possible. I'm also doing reviews, right? I'm also working on reviews on each of chapters. We talk about them just to make it interesting. Things I'm just bringing into Ajiro Tech, just to make learning fun. Okay, so that is very, very important. Okay, now these are advantages that we've talked about using CAL to enhance learning. Now, when we talk about disadvantages of using the computer aided learning is that it does not give students the experience of handling laboratory equipment. Imagine doing a chemistry practical or a physics practical, and you're watching how they are doing the titration. You're not doing titration, you're just watching how they're doing titration. So it doesn't give the experience, doesn't give the student that experience of handling this laboratory equipment. And that becomes a disadvantage. So we have to look at both the advantage and disadvantage of using the computer aided learning. Okay, they can be easily distracted because they're online. And before you know it, these learners who are studying in 1 minute are going to what search social networking sites, online gaming sites. This is one of the factors. It takes a lot of discipline to do homeschool, a lot of discipline to do homeschool. It can lead to isolation to the student because they are spending time in front of their own computers. There are so many times they've complained, I want to go back to school. But yes, it means that you have to spend a long time, right, in front of your computer. And that simply means that it needs to be carefully managed, Okay. Cal cannot answer usual questions, right? Even if they have access to all the resources I've mentioned, there are times where they have to call me, Mr. Ajao. We have series of personal one-on-one classes. They call me, Mr. Ajao, and I'm able to just come in to just fill in the gaps. Okay, so that is very, very important. I hope that makes sense.